Winter of 1943 on the Eastern Front was a place where ideas froze faster than the men holding rifles. The war between Germany and the Soviet Union had stretched into a nightmare of white wastelands, burned villages, and machinery so cold it moaned in the night. Ammunition was scarce, food even scarcer, and survival depended not on orders, but on improvisation. Among the soldiers stationed near the ruined village of Velika Doroha was Corporal Otto Weiss, a man the army didn't know what to do with. He was built more for a junkyard than a battlefield. Before the war he'd worked in a metal scrapyard in Dresden, fixing engines, welding broken axles, and breathing in the smoke of rusted machines. He had a mind that heard metal the way musicians hear notes. Every sound meant something. War, however, had no medals for men like him. Soldiers called him Tinker. Officers called him a problem. His commanding officer, Lieutenant Marcus Adler, despised disorder and improvisation. Otto's habit of inventing, adjusting, and questioning rubbed Adler the wrong way. When Otto brought his handmade booby trap design to him, a crude setup involving a rusted shovel, a tripwire, a spring hinge salvaged from a wrecked truck, and an old anti-tank charge, Adler banned it immediately. "This isn't a farm," Adler snapped. "It's the Wehrmacht. Leave the engineering to the engineers." Otto obeyed publicly. But privately, he trusted his instincts more than Adler's pride. So, when the platoon took defensive positions on the ridge overlooking the village ruins, low ammo, barely any mines, and deep snow making trenches useless, Otto planted one of his banned devices at the north approach. He dug into the snow with freezing fingers, buried the charge, rigged the wire, angled the shovel, and covered everything with fresh powder. It was ugly, primitive, and he believed in it more than any official equipment they had left. The trap worked on a simple truth: a mechanical strike doesn't jam in the cold. One step on the tripwire would yank the spring, slam the shovel down onto the detonator cap, and ignite the charge. Cheap, brutal, and reliable. The kind of thing war actually needed. But the lieutenant never needed to know. The morning the scout car arrived was silent. A pale blue dawn stretched across the dead village, and the only movement was the breath of nervous soldiers rising in thin clouds. Around 9:18 a.m., the familiar rattling growl of a Soviet engine echoed through the valley. Men tensed. Someone whispered, "Scout car." The BA-64 burst into view moments later, light, fast, armored just enough to shrug off small arms fire. Its turret-mounted machine guns swept the ridge, hunting for shapes in the snow. If it spotted them, it would radio artillery coordinates. They wouldn't survive the next 10 minutes. Otto felt his heart hammering, not from fear, but from certainty. Their anti-tank mines were planted too far south. Panzerfausts were few and almost useless at range. Rifle fire would bounce off the armor like pebbles. They were helpless. Unless the scout car reached the one patch of ground where Otto had placed the thing that didn't belong in a real army. The car slowed as it approached the northern slope. The gunner scanned the area, and for one terrifying moment Otto wondered if they spotted something, an indentation, a shift in snow, anything that betrayed his trap. The car rolled back a little, adjusting its path. Lieutenant Adler murmured, "Good. They're avoiding the ridge." But Otto knew better. If the scout car found another route, they would still die. All it needed was a clear view of their position to call in fire. Then fate decided. The scout car rolled forward again, adjusting slightly to the left. Its right wheel drifted just enough, and passed over a thin tripwire hidden under untouched snow. The wire snapped. The spring jerked violently. The rusted shovel swung downward with the full fury of coiled steel. A metallic clang echoed in the frozen air, and the anti-tank charge detonated with a roar that split the sky. The explosion swallowed the scout car whole. Snow erupted in a towering plume mixed with fire, mud, and jagged shards of steel. The vehicle lifted off the ground, flipping sideways like a rag doll kicked by a giant. Its turret tore off, its wheels vanished, and the hull folded in on itself in a blooming flower of burning metal. The ridge shook. Men ducked. The shockwave rolled across them like a hot wind. When the smoke thinned, only a mangled heap of blackened armor remained. No movement. No survivors. The silence that followed was almost holy. Soldiers stared at Otto with open mouths. Some laughed in disbelief. Some clapped him on the back. Others looked at him the way men look at a magician who pulls a tank out of a hat. Lieutenant Adler's face was ghost white. He swallowed hard, and finally croaked. What was that? Otto didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply answered. That was the rusted shovel you banned, sir. The men behind him chuckled. Someone actually cheered. Later that afternoon, Adler summoned him into the ruins of an old farmhouse. His voice was tight, like someone forcing out words coated in thorns. Corporal Weiss, I may have misjudged you. Otto stayed silent. Your device saved the company. I'm requesting the design be forwarded to command. Otto blinked. You want them to approve it? Approve it? They'll mass-produce it. But of course, that's not what happened. Command praised the ingenuity of field units, but Otto's name never made it into any report. The device was reclassified, redesigned, and renamed the Mechanical Trip Trigger Device, Model R43. No mention of improvised shovels. No credit to the corporal who had built it from trash and desperation. Yet among soldiers, men who actually lived and died on the front line, it became something else entirely. They called it Weiss's shovel. They whispered stories by campfires about the mechanic who saved an entire ridge with a rusted tool and a stubborn mind. Weeks later, during a rare moment of quiet, Otto sat by a dying fire as snow drifted gently around him. Lieutenant Adler approached, his posture less rigid than usual. Does it bother you? Adler asked. That they never gave you credit? Otto poked the fire with a stick, watching sparks fly into the night. Credit doesn't stop bullets, he said softly. But ideas save lives. Even when no one wants them. Adler nodded, and for the first time, looked at Otto not as a stubborn mechanic, but as the kind of man armies should have listened to long before disaster knocked. By spring, dozens of units were using crude versions of Otto's concept. Shovels, axes, planks, anything that could strike a detonator was put to use. Soldiers laughed whenever they found one still intact after winter thaw, remarking, "Another of Weiss's toys." And so, long after the ridge was abandoned and the snows melted into trenches, the legacy of a rusted shovel lived on, not in official documents, not in medals, but in the quiet understanding shared by countless soldiers. That sometimes, the idea that saves you is the one the officers laughed at. And sometimes the hero is simply the man stubborn enough to bury a shovel in the snow.